GoForThe2.com in with the Week 8 rapid fire selections. Before I get into the picks, it's only going to be 4 picks. I put out the Auburn Ole Miss selection in a separate video, so check that out. All the picks are up at GoForThe2.com. This coming Saturday, MSG Plus, MSG Networks, College Football Today kicks off. It's your pregame show prior to the 12 o'clock kicks, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern. Check it out. This coming Saturday, we give you all the top 25 matchups, have the Big Ten and Mountain West kicking off, give you all my best bets, not just the best bets that are on this video, some first half games, talk about also some under the radar games, games that I see as the week progresses. So tune in. It's not just the picks on this video. Tune in this Saturday, MSG Plus, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern. We go through all the big matchups. Also, the under-the-radar games have some great guests as well. So tune in this Saturday, sportsgrid.com or MSG Plus. Check your local cable provider. Then from 12 to 5 p.m. Eastern, in-game live kicks off. I go through all the in-game action, what I see on the football field, what I see in terms of the line movement in the books. So keep an eye out. 12 to 5 have some great games at 12 o'clock. Nebraska, Ohio State. We have Auburn, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, TCU. So there's more than enough games to break down. I take you through every single one, not just from the football aspect, but what the line movement and line changes. We try to find value as the week and as the afternoon progresses. So tune in this coming Saturday for 7 straight hours for your college football coverage. Starts at 10 o'clock, ends at 5. College Football Today and in-game live this coming Saturday. Rapid fire selections. Already gave you my pick for Auburn and Ole Miss. Let's jump into the matchup in Neyland Stadium. Third Saturday of October. One of the best rivalries in college football, owned by Alabama in recent years. What can you say about Alabama, man? They step up yet again against the number 1 defense. They trailed in the first half, and they just shut down Stetson Bennett and the crew. Matt Jones with a dynamic performance, 4 touchdowns, over 400 passing yards. Jalen Waddle with a 90-yard touchdown reception just broke the game wide open, 27-24. They forced some critical turnovers in that matchup. Najee Harris with a big day as well. But just Alabama put the pressure on Georgia's offense to match them score for score. In the second half, they couldn't do it. And credit Nick Saban and Steve Sarkisian for really out-game planning the Bulldogs in that matchup. When you look at the series perspective, for Alabama and Tennessee, I mean, it's not even close. Alabama has won 13 straight meetings in the series, picked up this victory last year, 35-13. They've dominated the last 4 meetings by an average margin of victory of 34 points per game. Last victory for Tennessee came back in 2006. On the flip side, you have a Tennessee team that's reeling after losing to Georgia, holding a first half lead of 21-17. They allowed that game to slip away, 44-21. They got shut down by Georgia's defense in the second half of that matchup. Follow that up. They were 18-2 against Kentucky. The last time Kentucky won in Neyland Stadium or Knoxville was 1984. And guess what? Terry Wilson and the crew dominated the Volunteers. They had 2 pick sixes. The secondary's playing lights out for Kentucky, and they just dominated on both sides of the ball. Physical in terms of the rushing attack from an offensive line perspective, and they outplayed Tennessee in all facets of the game. When you look at this matchup overall, I know on paper Alabama dominates. I know Alabama's clearly the number 1 team, but I really break this game down the way I broke down Louisville and Notre Dame last week. Tennessee has nothing to play for. This is their Super Bowl. I expect them to be into this matchup. On paper, they're the inferior team, but they played well last year on the road in Tuscaloosa. The only way Tennessee can be in this matchup from the spread perspective, and that's covering 21.5 in this ballgame, is to run the football with their running backs. Eric Gray and that offensive line need to run the football. They need to sustain drives and keep Mac Jones and that offense on the sidelines. They cannot get into a shootout. That'll put pressure on the offensive line and Garantano. He's an inconsistent quarterback, and they really need to get into a lower scoring game against Alabama. When you look at Alabama overall, they've had some emotional games. Played Texas A&M. They followed that up against Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. Ole Miss exposed them. Another assistant in Nick Saban. And then you followed up with another assistant in Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. And guess what? Another assistant with Jeremy Pruitt and the Volunteers in this matchup. I think they have to pull out all the stops. I think Alabama wins. But I do feel that Tennessee can make enough plays to play zone and not allow Mac Jones quick strikes that they cover this 21.5 point number Saturday afternoon in Neyland Stadium. This is their Super Bowl. They have nothing else to play for. Season is over. Tennessee finds a way to cover this number Saturday against the Crimson Tide. Another ball game that we're going to talk about is Oklahoma and TCU. Oklahoma has won 6 straight in the series over the Horned Frogs. They've won those games by an average margin of victory of 13 points per game, and have picked up this victory last year in Norman, 28-24. They did get this victory. They jumped out to a huge first half lead, Jalen Hurts and the crew. But in the second half, Max Duggan led the team back, and they had an opportunity to pull that game out in the fourth quarter. You look at this TCU team, they're reeling yet again in terms of Gary Patterson, under 500, 19-21 since 2016 within the Big 12. They didn't step up. They got outplayed by a more blue-collar team in Kansas State. But in this type of situation, with an extra week of preparation, I like the Horned Frogs in this matchup to cover this 7-point number. Let me tell you why. I think you look at their secondary right now in terms of TCU, holding opposing offenses and quarterbacks to 55% completion percentage. That's a solid statistic in terms of, I think they could force Spencer Rattler, same type of mentality as Mac Jones and Tennessee's defense. They can force them to work down the field and force Spencer Rattler, who's still an inexperienced freshman quarterback, into mistakes in this matchup. I think the extra week of preparation will benefit TCU more than it'll benefit Oklahoma coming off the solid overtime win over their arch rival Texas. So that can disrupt their continuity in terms of that offensive flow. So keep an eye out for that as this game plays out in Fort Worth. Second factor as well is when you look at Oklahoma overall, again, this offense still isn't clicking on all cylinders. You look at the rushing attack, they're still only averaging 144 rushing yards per game, 3.5 yards per carry. That could still put Rattler into long third down situations, and this is still not the same offense that we've seen under Jalen Hurts or Kyler Murray over the last couple of years, where they want to run the football more effectively over 200. So I think that could be a factor in this ballgame. I think if TCU strikes fast, gets Oklahoma into an ugly scoring, low scoring game, just the way it was last year, they have an opportunity to strike the upset. I'm still not sold on the consistency of Rattler. Still not sold on Lincoln Riley. I know he's a solid coach, and you can laugh at me in terms of that. But in terms of second half adjustments, he does not make second half adjustments in critical junctures. Did it yet again against Texas in that Oklahoma-Texas game. They were tied 17 up at the half. He had a 31-17 fourth quarter lead and didn't make adjustments and allowed the Longhorns to come back into that matchup. Did it last year against TCU. Did it against Iowa State. Did it in the college football playoff against Georgia. So he's good when he has a lead. But in terms of making adjustments, not sold on Lincoln Riley in that factor. And I give the slight edge to Gary Patterson in this type of situation with Rattler at the helm. So I expect TCU to be in this ballgame from start to finish, and I'll call for the upset. Why not? I think TCU's ripe at playing at home. They knocked off Texas last year. I think they strike the upset. 28-24, TCU does get the victory. Flip it around from last year. TCU picks up the 28-24 win over the Sooners in this ballgame. Big ACC battle between Miami and Virginia. Miami has won 4 of the last 5 against the Cavaliers. Picked up this victory last year as a 2.5 point underdog, 17-9. They've won the last 4 of 5 by 12.5 points per game. They gutted out a solid 12-point win over Pittsburgh last week with Joey Yellen at the helm instead of Kenny Pickett. They jumped out early, held on for that lead. Defense played well, but this offense now has me concerned going up against a blue-collar defense in the Cavaliers. When you look at D'Eriq King and Miami's offense right now, they're not running the football effectively. It started a couple of weeks ago against one of the best front sevens, Clemson. They only average around 2.5 yards per carry. Last week against another physical defensive front in Pittsburgh, 3.5 yards per carry. But more importantly, their inability to actually run the football is putting them in long third down situations, and that's putting pressure on D'Eriq King. Now, prior to that Clemson game, Miami was converting 53% on third down conversions. The last two games against Pittsburgh and Clemson, 30% and 26% respectively. And when you look at D'Eriq King in terms of completion percentage, 44% against Clemson, 51% against Pittsburgh. That's the Achilles heel of Miami. That's the problem last year when they only converted 27% on third downs. Their inability to run the football against bigger physical defensive fronts puts them into long third downs that puts pressure on their offensive line, and defenses can actually utilize blitz packages to maintain D'Eriq King inside the pocket, where he is less effective when opposed to when he breaks contain. So keep an eye out for that matchup. Now, Virginia still doesn't have Brennan Armstrong, their quarterback. They're going to utilize a 3-quarterback system going on the road against Miami, but they did show signs of running the football effectively. You look at Lindell Stone, he's the passer out of the group. They used Armstead, who's a freshman, and Keaton Thompson, the former Mississippi State quarterback. They utilized Armstead and Keaton Thompson in terms of read options. They fell behind 14-0 against Wake Forest. They tied that ball game up at 20 and then fell apart in the second half. They allowed Kenneth Walker and Wake Forest to break out. Now, when you look at Virginia, statistically, they're allowing only 136 rushing yards per game. But the last couple of weeks against NC State and Wake Forest, they allowed 171 and 175. So that's the matchup going up against Miami. Now, I think Bronco Mendenhall is a better coach than Manny Diaz. I think when you look at just the big, in terms of physicality, still give the edge to Virginia, even though they don't have 5-star recruits or 4-star recruits like Miami. They're disciplined. They're rarely out of position. And I think they can force some mistakes by that Miami offense. In the end, I think Miami wins, but I think it's a close game. I think it's 7 points or less. I think Virginia's in this ballgame from start to finish, and they cover the 11.5-point number in this ballgame. Another matchup is Baylor and Texas. What can you say about this team? Texas, 2-week layoff in terms of Oklahoma. Baylor, I mean, I can't even tell you the last time they played. They've had so many cancellations. They're back on track. Dave Aranda said that the Bears are excited to play this matchup. You look at a solid quarterback matchup between Charlie Brewer and Sam Ehlinger in terms of this ball game. But really, where is Tom Herman in the mentality of Texas right now? There's a lot of uncertainty. People are talking about Urban Meyer. People are talking about Ehlinger, his teammates abandoning him in this matchup. And keep in mind that Texas does have Oklahoma State on deck in this ball game. I throw out the statistics in this matchup. This game comes down to two factors. Texas has the athletes to challenge the Baylor secondary over the top. This is not the same defense last year with Matt Rule when all those defensive starters moved on to the NFL. They struggled with West Virginia. They struggled from an offensive perspective as well. They have John Lovett. They have Treston Ebner. But in terms of their ability to go toe-to-toe with Texas's offense, I don't see it. This is not the same Baylor team that we've seen in recent years. And I think Texas's back is against the wall. They haven't stepped up as a solid double-digit favorite. They're pounding Baylor right now. Give me Texas. I think they step up. The extra week of preparation benefits them. I think they can run on this front seven of Baylor that's given up 156 rushing yards per game heading into this matchup. I think they can wear them down. I think they're a smaller defensive front. And I think Texas does get a dominating victory, 17 points or more over the Bears. I know the Bears won this matchup 24-10 last year. I don't care. I think Texas is significantly the better team in this matchup. The Longhorns roll to a 17-point or more victory this coming Saturday. Tune into College Football Today and In-Game Live for all your college football action. I hope you have a great week. See you on Saturday.